Okay.
So as we look at curriculum development, here is the agenda that I was going to approach it with. Approximately 30-minute primer review of curriculum development in school-based ag education, and then a 30-minute question and answer share session. Because what you probably really need is, how do I do this specifically? And so I want to give benefit to those who are on the calls. But the first 30 or so minutes, it's going to be kind of a primer and a reminder. I went ahead and told you, hey, these are my primary sources that I'm talking from. 2 books there, The Foundations of Ag Education, and then the Handbook on Ag Education, which was your required text for the Penn State series of Ag Ed 100, 311, and I believe 413. Dr. Young, of course, will correct anything. I also refer to our Methods of Teaching book from Newcomb occasionally as we go forward. 3 essential questions in 30 minutes. What are the different terms? Where do I start in curriculum development? And then what are some specific resources or ideas, like some concepts that we can talk about? That's kind of where I got excited to think about some new ways of looking at things. So I'm going to try to make sure that, or I'm going to ask you as our host, let me know if any comments come across that I need to address. Okay?
Will do.
So operational definitions. Let's start off some terms and just kind of remind ourselves about where we are. A curriculum, a set of experiences, courses of study, and activities outlined by an educational program in which students must engage to achieve the desired outcomes of a program. Now remember, we have SIP codes, and some examples could be Ag Mech, General Ag. I want to show you something real quick. Those are the SIP codes, right? And you've seen them. You should know what your SIP code is. You should know how many SIP codes you have. And that's why I'm so excited Dr. Ewing's on board, because this is a kind of a fun conversation for us to make sure that we're connecting some of those classes of 413 and 412. But right at the beginning, I want you to remember, I want to give you this coaching, Toby and Lindsay and everybody, that your program and you are unique. So when we talk curriculum and I talk to an English teacher or a math teacher, it becomes much more straightforward because they'll not pull out a textbook or they'll have simply a set of standards. But remember, your curriculum is representative of your school-based ag education program, which I know you remember and acknowledge includes work-based learning, includes the leadership laboratory of your youth organization, and includes your classroom and that overlap. So when you think about curriculum development, you actually have to plan and think about that a curriculum is not just a set series of lessons. Rather, a curriculum is a set of experiences, course of study, and activities. So part of your curriculum could be maintaining a set of student experiences for work-based learning in the AET. That could be part of the curriculum, and then you have to ask yourself, where did I teach it? How did I evaluate it? I do hope that at any point in time, you can stop and ask a question, okay, because I know that that might be helpful. So we have the curriculum, then we have a courses of study. A courses of study, think of classes, and generally they're a semester or a year in length. Introduction to agriculture. So when you put together your scope and sequence, you are showing, I see I'm misspelling, dang darn it, I misspelled curriculum. I'll just point it out to everybody and you can laugh at me. Anyway, well, as we look at courses of study, that's that scope of sequence of how they fit together to achieve your curriculum goals. So introduction to ag, followed by principles of animal science, followed by advanced animal science, followed by capstone course. As an example, might be a scope and sequence of 4 classes, the pathway that a student would follow through your program. Then we have a unit of instruction. This is a concept, essentially, in a class. Generally, we recommend 3 weeks in length, 3 weeks in length. And an example could be livestock feeds and feeding. Then we have lesson plans, which are a group of objectives as part of a unit, 1 to 3 days in length. Example, identifying components of the ruminant digestive system. And finally, the learning objective, a statement of what the students will be able to do when they've completed the instruction. And so I'm a visual learner. Maybe it helps you to see that pyramid, right? I didn't even put objectives at the top. But program, curriculum, course of study, unit of instruction, lesson plan. So before we go any way further, and as you've experienced and had to talk with, what do they call them? Every school calls them something different. Curriculum coordinators, teaching coaches, and all these different things you've experienced now at your school. Do we have any questions about these terms? Okay. Sweet. Then we will move forward. And I can, on my screen, see your faces, except for Lindsay and John. So feel free to nod your head because I can't evaluate where you're at. We know that our program's unique. We know that we have these zip codes from Pennsylvania. And by the way, as I will be sharing this file folder, that's hyperlinked right there. So in case you wanted to dig in and get to them. Out of curiosity, since I have some of you on the call, I want to know what you are. So Laura, unmute Metric. What is your zip code for Union City?
General.
Your general ag?
Yep.
Like that. Jesse, what's happening at Turkey Foot?
We're in the process of applying for our general ag zip code.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. It makes me very proud. Toby, I don't even know. What do you got out there where you're at Central Mountain?
I'm in the ag production, and then we also have ag mechanics and natural resources.
You have 3 zip codes, and have they assigned you ag productions to make sure it happens? Is that what you just rock on? And Lindsay, what is Blackfoot's? You can type it, please, and chat it. What is theirs? What did you get, Laura? Rice, could you read to me the chat? I can't.
General ag. General ag. Do you hear me? Oh no, are you still there? Nod your head. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we hear you. He is frozen. And I hope I didn't mess it up because I privately messaged him and said, Lindsay's at Black Hawk, not Blackfoot. So maybe I really just ruined the whole meeting right there. He's so mad he walked away from his computer and just did a still shot. My guess is he's got technical difficulties, but we'll welcome Janae until Dr. Foster gets back on. Good to see you, Janae. And looks like Leanne Weimer has joined us as well. Very good. I see Laura's welcomed them in the chat box, so I guess I could be quiet now.
That's okay.
I think Dr. Foster's logging off, logging back on, so he's at my desk. Maybe he's going to take my desk. Yeah. Okay, blue screen of death. I'll close all my other good stuff and let Foster have my, you won't have a picture of him, but here he is.
Hey team, so yeah, blue screen of death happened. That's always fun. Whole computer crashed down, now restarting. Much to my frustration, now I have to see if I can go through Dr. Ewing's files, which he sets things up a little bit differently, and see. Yeah, see, he's trying to open file folder cabinets, and I'm trying to get into Google Drive. Y'all all can appreciate that kind of conversation between Dr. Ewing and myself. I'm going to have to go through here. Thank you for your patience. So, Janae McMichael, what is your program zip code while I pull this out?
We're general or ag production.
Do you only have one zip code?
At this time, yeah, only one.
And who's responsible for that as far as, I suppose that it would be Holly that would be keeping track of that since you're new, correct?
Yeah, at this point.
At this point, very good. Okay, team, so so embarrassed. Did all that work? Oh well. All right, so now I need to figure out how to share screen. It's sad I just kicked Dr. Ewing off, isn't it? I think he was okay with it though. Okay, now do you see the words curriculum development? Can I get an affirmation? Thank you. Okay, so I was talking about where do I start, right? And that's kind of the most difficult thing for curriculum development is how do I even get going? And this is probably part of the conversation that we were looking forward to having. Well, I wanted to remind everybody of that Wiggins and McTeague notion of understanding by design. And it is always curious to me as we talk and hear about these things, I kind of always do validity checks with my recent graduates, which all of you on the call are. Have you encountered the term understanding by design or UBD or Wiggins and McTeague or beginning with the end in mind in any conversations as part of your teacher in service thus far? So I'm looking for head nods or chats. No from Jesse. No from Toby, no from Laura, no from Janae. Okay, well, cool. Always interesting. What about Lindsay, Laura, since you're supposed to be monitoring the chat?
She says no as well.
Well, see, I can call Lindsay Wilcox out on that, and I know that part of her lead teacher training for CASE involved Grant's, Wiggins, and McTeague's Understanding by Design, because that's the process they use for the CASE learning curriculum. But I won't do that. I can't see her look of shock, horror, and amazement as since she doesn't have a camera. When we talk about understanding by design, and what I'm going to do, like it's going to have so much more sense to you now, I will share a link as soon as I fire back up to this folder I created that has a handbook, so I'm probably doing a copyright violation, and all the forms for completing this process that you can look at that I think is going to help a lot right at this point. But there's 3 stages they talk about. What are my desired results? Then what's going to be evidence, and then what are going to be the experiences to get there. And like, you have to think about, where am I trying to end up? Quite frankly, some of these team, because of the nature that we live in Pennsylvania, are going to be answered straightforward to you, and some of them aren't. Like the acceptable evidence, well, the acceptable evidence that we currently have in place, whether I like it or not, is NOCTI. Right? So you're going to have to be thinking about using that as a guide. Now, what's funny is that NOCTI, I don't think that's an appropriate desired result. Is the desired result you want is, oh, my kids passed NOCTI? Well, what good did that do them? And that's what I want to kind of unpack here today. Your desired result is probably my student is prepared to leave my program and either have gainful employment or go to the next step of their career ladder. The evidence I'll have is passing NOCTI, and then these are the learning experiences that are going to help us do that as we go forward. Are we comfortable with those 3 stages as I kind of take a moment to breathe? I don't want to bore you, but I also don't want to go too fast. That's kind of the fear of doing webinars. So quick, once again, reminder, what are the factors as we start talking about that desired results? What are the factors to consider? Now, this comes straight out of your methods text. What's the purpose and objectives of Ag Ed? Organization and content and subject matter, the clientele to be taught, the principles of teaching and learning, and the knowledge and skill of the teacher. So those are 5 factors that we could go through and talk about. I left some of the papers I printed off from my notes back at my other desk. That's okay. We also have to take in consideration those 11 dimensions of school-based ag education. And I put them on the screen just like this, keeping it simple. When you start talking about what are your desired results, you're thinking of your community. Like the desired results of Central Mountain would have to be different from the desired results of Blackhawk, from Union City, and from Lampeter Strasburg. It's so fun that, who we have on the call right now are at so many different places across the state, because you're going to have different community resources in your back door. You're going to have different people in your community. Your advisory committees are going to be different. So you have to ask yourself, how am I capturing information representing those 11 dimensions of my program to take into consideration that? I went ahead and threw this in here to remind you for some of those, like, how do I design a lessons? We start with those objectives, then we create the assessment, then we organize content, then we review the application, create a way for the student to apply it, and then and only then do we craft the interest approach and the wrap up, the fun activities. So I wanted to present, you can tell that most of this, and of course you're going to get access to this webinar, is going to be what I hope to be open back and forth and questions as we try to unpack these more together in conversation. But here's one concept that I found that was fun from Edutopia, is what about a curriculum of concerns? What if we built engaging curriculum around not just what interests students, but what concerns them? For example, food science may interest them, but what if we did food unwrapped, because they're worried about what's in their food or where their food comes from? And it's in the news a lot. And I gave you a link that y'all could play with later. Just a concept to present. Here's another one that I thought was pretty good. When you look at student voice in curriculum design, what are some suggested do's and don'ts? Do ask the students if they know the difference between standards and curriculum. Don't simply say, who wants to help create our curriculum? That information is there. Do identify non-negotiable elements. Like, hey, example for you guys, right? Non-negotiable, NOCTI is going to be happening at the end. They don't have a choice in that. But don't mislead students to think about how the extent of their influence on curriculum development. Do ask students to brainstorm potential sources and solutions for resistance to their increased role. Don't make students brainstorm blindly. What are we shooting for? And that link will take you to some best practices for facilitating brainstorm. Do provide examples. Don't believe that they'll have the only sole power, that they get to pick everything they do. And I think if you've talked about student motivation, and I think I saw that earlier, maybe I'm getting some of my wires crossed, but that we know that having student choice can increase student ownership when they feel they have autonomy to select how they're going to be assessed or what they're going to be asked to do. Do encourage students to reflect on how time affects curriculum decisions, and don't wait until after the students have designed a cool assignment to tell them that, oh, we don't have enough time to complete it. Like, where are you building in their choice? Do explore ways that building upon current curricular assignments can introduce new learning opportunities. Don't neglect to model examples of way they may modify. Do acknowledge that students may react differently, and don't force students upon choices upon students who are uncomfortable in participating. Everybody doesn't have to do that. And this is the last one. There was a whole book, and I actually had a link to it because I knew that there was the potential on this call to have teachers from 3 to 5 years. And as you continue to stay at your schools, you're going to be asked to be more of a teacher leader. Like, I'm sure you've all sat in a certain professional development session where it's just kind of like, well, y'all gonna have to take it and do this. Like, they're gonna like throw it at you and say, fix the problem, whether we like it or not. So I linked to a book here that was a 9-step process. And I was like, man, I just want to show them this. Not that I want to talk to Deepa, because check this out. Like, when they talk about the steps of planning and development of curriculum, they don't talk about it by months. I'll go through it again, but look at it. They talk about years 3 to 7. Like, when we're going to implement curriculum and make purposeful changings, perhaps it could be a 7-year process and not something about just what we're teaching next semester if we're doing that purposeful. AKP, what's rocking? Uh-oh, no sound. Greenwood, they're kind of technologically challenged over there. Anyway, ooh, she got a face. I got a face on that one. So when they said the planning and development process, I thought that you could revisit this because it gives a way to think about it. Like, step 1, establish the foundation. What are the state and national standards? Well, right away, we get frustrated because we don't have state content standards in agriculture in Pennsylvania. And so what would I do if I was someone trying to meet a SIP code? I might look at the programs of study that were provided by the Pennsylvania Department of Ag, which I believe currently exist for horticulture and ag mechanics. I think that's it. You guys probably know better than me. Like, I'm trying to remember, they were going through those in the last year. But to be honest, if I didn't find what I wanted, I would be pulling out those national AF&R standards and be looking at them. How does this line up? Then I would do data analysis. What does my WIB tell me? What are those things? They're there. Then I look at the assessments. Then I'm going to be looking at that NOCTI, or at least examples and how they're working through it, or talking to experienced teachers that have proctored it. And then we talk about writing the curriculum. What's the scope and sequence map? And then finally, a resource review. Sometimes I'm like, okay, where are y'all at and where do you want to talk about? Because when I had to teach and design curriculum that didn't exist, oftentimes a starting point for me was a textbook. Like, I would go find a book that inspired me. Like, okay, I want to teach animal sciences. How did they line up the chapters? They wrote this book. And I look at the chapters and I start designing where we're at. Board approval, staff development, implementation. Honestly, this process was above where you guys are at. But I wanted you to see it to say that, hey, if you're really going to shift the needle and you're going to change a design of your program, we got to have buy-in from advisory boards, school boards, and there has to be professional development that accompanies that. And that's why they need to talk at it from that holistic view. So I don't know. I think I actually got done probably a little bit quicker than 30 minutes. It appears that Laura is texting back and forth with somebody because I can tell the laugh and smirking, so I can't see. And from the laugh and reaction to McMichael, she's probably texting back and forth with her. And so I want to go ahead and bring that conversation back to as a group conversation where I'm not just talking anymore. Threw some stuff out there. It looks like we did that in about 20 minutes. What time we have left in your very busy lives, how can I help? What would you like to know about curriculum development and planning? So I'm going to stop sharing the screen.
Just to set the record straight, people, Krista was texting me because she can't hear anything, and I was smiling at her, and she thought I was laughing at her, but I wasn't. But please ask your questions now, people.
And you know, I know life is too short just to sit in a meeting. So if you don't have questions, I guess you're done. I hope that I addressed the concern that Laura brought to me was how do we approach curriculum design? And if I'm a Pennsylvania ag teacher, like there's a lot of different points where we can jump in on that conversation. So tell me what you think you have to design and where you want to jump in for some resources. And the cool thing about Zoom is it actually works pretty good. So I don't think you'll have to worry as much about mocking or muting. So since there's 6 or 7 of us, feel free to unmute your mic so we can just have some back and forth conversation. Nobody has unmuted yet. I want to talk to somebody. I don't care. We'll talk about the weather for 5 minutes. I just want to see if we can do that.
I unmuted, okay?
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, exactly. Janae, unmute. And then you give me a how. You can just say, yes, I unmuted. You give me a thumbs up.
I'm here.
Okay, yes. You're
Roger, Roger.
Okay, so talk to me. I'm looking here at Jesse's at her first year in her school, second year total. Toby's at the first year of his school. Janae's at the first year of her school. Laura's at the second year of her school. Lindsay is my old school person. She's been teaching 3 in Maryland, 3 at Blackhawk. Am I right on that, Lindsay? Oh, Lindsay doesn't have her microphone. And KP, you and I are just old, so we're just going to leave that at that. She's here to help me pitch in, and I want to solicit from her input. So talk to me as you think back, and life has changed, and you've gone through 15 weeks of an internship. You know, if I think back to that 4 credits of 412 and when we were doing instructional design, what has hit you in the face in these first months, that first semester that you weren't expecting or you want to kind of talk about as far as your curriculum? What I know is that you're given a lot of autonomy. You decide what happens in that classroom. That's unlike other peers who maybe there's a team of science teachers and they have to all teach the same thing because of what I know that as ag teachers, and I look across the who's on the call right now, the only one of you that has anybody to talk to, I guess Toby has 2, but he has his own zip code, so they probably just tell him, hey, go teach your zip code. And then Janae has Holly, but pretty much you have autonomy and ownership of what happens on a day-to-day basis. So where do you have questions?
I'll say something. I don't know if it's not really a question, but this awkward silence is killing me right now. So for me, like, for me right now as a first year teacher, I feel like I haven't had enough time to sit down and necessarily plan out the way or even plan out all of the outcomes that I think that my kids should have. Like I have a general idea in the back of my head, but I have had a hard time finding the time to sit down and put it all together to flow through, especially like the entire year.
Oh, absolutely.
So right now I feel like that's kind of where I'm struggling, is just being able to put that whole plan down for an entire year. And right now I just find myself, getting ready for the next unit and planning it that way. But in the future, I definitely want to have a better flow. And I think that's where I'm struggling right now, at least, is just having that time to put all of the pieces together and make it fit.
Hey, thanks for sharing, Toby. So I want to tell everybody that's natural. Sometimes I get worried when I talk to teachers, everybody's trying to be perfect, right? Like I need to tell you, hey, that's natural. Year 1 is all about survival, straight up. Get through it. Like you're usually hired in late, you're feeling there's so many different moving factors. It's survival. And that's why, to let you know and kind of be very transparent and honest, why I'm so adamant about our teacher candidates having lesson plans designed before going out, because I know that those student teacher units become your life preservers of year 1. Like, good Lord, thank God I've taught this before, and at least we can pull that and go. And that's why it's so important when we go through student teaching that we get those lesson plans. But what that opens up the opportunity is recognizing like, okay, I need to be purposeful about how I will be spending my time in the summer. So this is kind of how some of these good talks go through. Right now, as you look ahead, you need to be pulling down straight up a calendar and penciling out what is your summer calendar by the time school starts, probably August 21st. I'm going to go and call it. Janae McMichael, when does Lampeter Strasburg start in fall of 17?
I think it's like August 28th or something.
Sweet. August 28th. So back from, and when does school let out, Janae?
June 2nd.
She knew that one a little bit quicker. I can tell you, everybody, so jump on that. Countdown has already begun. So June 2nd to August 28th. She's got to have a calendar in front of her and say, boom, this is family vacation. Boom, this is State FFA convention. This is PWE summer conference. And you know what? I'm setting aside 5 days of actual curriculum planning. Like that has to be not, oh, I'm going to do this, this, and this. Nope. 5 days, 40 hours of my time, 8 hours a day. I'm going to like talk about and think purposefully about where do I take my kids in my program for my SIP code. Okay, and maybe like, oh, hell, what does that mean? Well, maybe I just take it down to a class and say, this is my class. What are going to be the units in that class? And maybe I start trying to go through all of my classes that way. And then does it fit and how does it flow? Like at some point, you've got to figure a system that you're going to work through. And then you can step back and say, okay, that's what I thought. That's where my head was because I can conceptualize it. Since I know I'm going to be held accountable to NOCTI, what do I know about the NOCTI exam? And did I actually ever teach my kids the crap they're going to test them on and then tell me if I have a good program or I'm a good teacher? And so maybe that's a process you can go through.
I guess that's kind of where I am with my 7th and 8th grade, kind of seeing how to line them up and make them work together. With the second semester of a switch coming in, I've kind of decided to try and run them backwards from what I did in the fall to see if it works better that way conceptually, and just making sure and kind of trying to connect the content for what they need to know for next year is where I'm kind of at. Like, I think this works. I think this gives them the building blocks, but it's kind of trial and error right now with that.
So Jesse, that's cool information. You're looking at 7th and 8th graders and how a 7th grade class fits to an 8th grade class, fits to your high school program. And each class is a semester long or a year long?
Or it's a semester long for 7th and 8th. And I have 2 sections of each. So that's why I ran it.
Is it combined 7th and 8th?
No. So that's a little different from my last school. They are separate, which works out. So it's just connecting them and building off of them. So giving them the foundation. This is what you need to know before you get into 8th grade. And for the 8th graders, this is what you need to know before you decide to break off into the other classes, where before I had them all together and then I was getting my 7th graders again as 8th graders. So I kind of had to teach them
different
separately. Yeah. At the same time. So this is much easier.
That's cool. And so then let's be real. She should not be driven by what I'd call NOCTI outcomes at the 7th and 8th grade level. The 7th and 8th grade level, we're talking about awareness and being more purposeful in selecting our high school classes. An example, remember those 11 dimensions? She has to take into consideration the weather and the time of the year. Like, example, when are we going to teach entomology, team?
Spring would be ideal.
I sure wouldn't want to teach it in January or February when everything's dead and it's snow on the ground out there. But maybe in April and May, we can actually go get an insect collection and be really fun. So that's an example of taking into consideration those external factors. And this is an example as you grow in your development as a professional educator of working smarter and not harder. KP, do you have a microphone yet?
I don't know, do I?
Yeah, you do. Thank goodness. So I'm going to ask you a question. I know something you love is parliamentary procedure. When is your district parliamentary procedure contest?
Our first one is March 28th.
When do you teach your introduction to parliamentary procedure unit?
Typically in December.
Do y'all see the timing connection there? If she introduces it in December, it's not dependent on weather. She can gain their interest, and if kids want to be on the team, she can start them off January and coaching up through March. So then you have a team. And that's how your dimensions of your program of FFAs, your leadership, laboratory, intercurricular, contribute to when you teach something, as one example. So you got to be working smarter, not harder. Another example I can think of just from visiting Greenwood, it would deal, and KP, you can lay it out. When is your district, I'm going to use the wrong term, your conservation district soils event?
Oh, the Envirothon.
Envirothon?
Envirothon. It's in May.
And so how does that impact when y'all teach certain things?
We typically teach a week of each topic each week of April. So we can make sure that we get out into, we have different, obviously some things we dig into a little bit deeper, and so they're usually on the front end, but we try to really expose all the kids to all the topics that they're going to be exposed to at the Envirothon pretty close to the event.
So the point is we're trying to set y'all up for wins. Find out what's important to your community and how does your curriculum contribute to making your life easier by preparing students going into that. Does that make sense? Like, I'm trying to think of like each of your communities about what's going on. Automatic lights. Don't you love them, KP? Anyway, like Janae, Lancaster County, county fair in September.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Town fair?
End of September.
Okay.
Yeah, town, I guess. There's a
So
lot of county fairs.
You know what would be really fun for her to think about, like it'd make her life easier, is that in September at the start of school, we might teach a unit on how do we communicate agriculture to the public? What's an effective display? And then all of a sudden connect it to where they create one that she can have a very visible presence at her town fair. And therefore it's all connected. And then later on she can revisit. Remember when we taught that? Hey, we want an ag communications team. How are we going to go forth with that in the spring? Because she's already introduced it. How about other questions? I don't want to just talk the talk.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm going to be writing some curriculum for our advanced level mechanics course this summer, and we'd like to take it to our advisory board just for some feedback. So is anyone that's had the experience before have recommendations for how I can approach that conversation with my advisory board in terms of, is there a way I can get really good feedback, not just from like talking back and forth? Should I give them some type of form? Should I let them think about it and get back to me? You know, these are people I only see twice a year, really.
And they're not education professionals. That's what you got to remember. So when I've pitched that before, I just went to a workshop on Saturday that would work for this. It's called resource mapping. And so how many people?
On our advisory board?
Yeah.
10.
Awesome. Imagine, like, I use the term butcher paper. That
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would get because it's cheap. Kids can also, the big white, roll it out on the whole table, have a set of markers out there and say, here's the goal. We want to teach advanced ag mechanics. First question, and y'all can just write and connect and stand back. You can say the first question I have to you is, these are the careers that I've identified that we'd be preparing students for. Do you agree with that? And then you can start saying, what concepts do you think they need to know? What do kids need to know for these careers? And that's honestly the deepest level that you can go to. So they get out and they say, draw a concept and circle it, and then tell me how it's related to the other concepts. And so they can start concept mapping out what kids need to know. And so then what's going to happen is someone's going to say, well, they need to know TIG welding. And then you can say, okay, to understand TIG, so TIG welding becomes a circle. And then after they do that, you can say, it's okay, it's this TIG welding. What does that look like? Well, they need to know how to do it. They need to be able to identify the parts. They need to know how to order materials. I don't know. Then it starts branching off. So that's a very conceptually, graphically driven, because they're not going to read either. Nobody wants to read when they come to those meetings, and it gives them something to do. And so you that might be a suggestion how you do it. KP, have you ever led that conversation through your program?
We have. What we've done before is, in the past, we've sorry, I see all these rabbits now.
I'm going to mute you, Toby, if you keep making all these kind of weird noises.
Sorry, the goats in the greenhouse are making all sorts of noise, so sorry.
Okay. So Laura's going to mute you, Toby. There you go.
Okay. What we have done is sent our curriculum to our advisory committee in the past, the old curriculum, and then come together, similar to what Dr. Foster just mentioned, kind of, okay, this is what we've done before, but we don't necessarily have to stick with that. It's a blank slate and an empty page, and let's see where we can go from here. And it actually was, I was nervous the first time because you just don't know. Like Dr. Foster said, they're not education professionals, and that you just never know where that conversation is going to head, but it's always been very positive. And obviously, you ultimately have the control over what you want to do as well, but it really is great to get their feedback.
So Janae, if you could make, you got to think about, I love Krista's suggestion that you give them something ahead of time to kind of get their brain going. Mm-hmm. So, but I know that's going to be limited to what they're going to read. So if you want to put your best thought and keep it to a one-pager back and front that just says, this is the name of the class, Here's a 2-sentence description. Here's 3 careers that I think that we're trying to prepare for. And here are 10 concepts that I plan on teaching during the course.
Yeah.
Is that correct and on? And then they might look at that and then you can say, okay, I sent y'all that where I was. I want to start through the process of what the class would look for. First question, what should we teach? Or what concepts should we teach? Next question might be, because I want to think of my prompts to facilitate, who in the community, and this is where you're getting unique information that nobody else can give you, should I be talking to about these concepts? Because they're going to know friends and say, yeah, if you're not talking to John, John's doing this all the time. You're silly. Like they need to be connected, or so-and-so hardware should be a part of this because they really care about this, so forth and so on.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Good question. Good approach. And then don't overburden them. Like if that's really information you want, give time in your advisory board meeting to do it. Say, guys, our primary work is we're going to spend, and I tell them we have 1 hour, and I want to tap all 10 of you to give me some suggestions about how this course is going to go. I've done some pre-work and sent to you a week ahead of time, but we're going to have 3 prompts. We're going to ask, what should we teach? How will we know they're successful? What should students be able to do? And who else, who should we be tapping as resources in our community? What are the connections we need to know? And that might be the only 3 prompts, and I need to make sure that I've planned about 45 minutes for it.
Yeah, that's good.
Toby, I will question the notion that goats in the greenhouse. You know, I don't know if that's the best use of greenhouse facilities. Maybe we could. I'm just giving you a hard time. I don't care.
Hey, we have plants too. We have 223 hanging baskets, and we're still working on trays.
And what are you going to do when those goats eat those hanging baskets? That's all I got to say.
Because they can't reach them because they're in a pen. Although they have gotten out like 12 times this year, but we think we have a lock on it now, so we're good.
Oh, we have a goat greenhouse. Brand new. It's cutting edge goat greenhouse. We grow goats year round, seasonally independent. Okay.
Dr. Foster, just real quick, just back to Janae really quickly. The first time that we took our curriculum to our advisory committee, it was just such an awesome experience because Mike and I never thought of this. And why didn't we? We have no idea. Our freshman ag class was conflicting with Spanish 1, the freshman Spanish class. And they started talking about how migrant workers are coming into our area, and they are, and the importance of knowing Spanish. And it was just like a light bulb moment came on, and how important. We never ever would have thought of that, and I don't know why, you know, looking back. But it was such a light bulb moment that you really need to let your kids take Spanish if they want to take ag, because how important are those two coupled together. Right. So it's a great opportunity to tap your resources in your local community.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is a great point and opportunity for all of you, especially when you're designing your programs, to realize that an advisory board isn't a reunion meeting. It doesn't happen just once a year. And so like, and you got to be careful because like Jesse and Laura at Small Schools, Metric, they might be telling you, oh, well, this is our occupational advisory council, and that's for everybody. You know what? You need a program advisory board, okay? Don't ever forget that. And that board probably needs to meet 4 times a year. And that would be, at KP, I don't ever ask you, how often does Greenwood meet?
We meet twice a year.
And so when you start talking about really getting input and asking them to do a lot and not wanting meetings that kill them, that last forever, you kind of have very purposeful, targeted meetings. And quarterly meetings might be a suggestion to think about with 1.5 to 2 hour max meetings. So one meeting might be curriculum. Next meeting might be facilities. Third meeting might be a fun meeting where they just select awards because they love seeing and interacting with kids. And then the 4th meeting might be strategic planning and visioning. Here's our 5-year, 3-year plan of where we're taking the program. Let's look at how does our curriculum, facilities, and everything come together. All right, well, this wasn't a topic area of just advisory board, so let's talk about where you're at now about curriculum concerns, and we can go all the way down to lesson planning. We can go all the way big. It's funny how, to be quite honest, most of the conversation I bet you're having with the people in your building is never at the level of detail of like how we're actually teaching learning objectives day to day. It's always very conceptual of like, hey, where do kids go from here? What's the next class? Or at that higher level. But we all know that if we don't have good day to day, then they're not going to come back for another class. especially curious about you, Metric, of Union City, building a program from the ground up. I mean, like,
Here's my current struggle. We have like 8 different classes. So last year we had 3, and then we added 2 more. So I teach 5, and then Corey Bailey teaches hydroponics.
yeah,
But the students have like free range to pick whatever class they want, whenever they want, which was okay last year because everything was new to everybody.
but you don't
This
have a
year-
scope and sequence, basically. You don't have a sequence where we're building.
And I've like tried to be like, hey, it's really hard to have them take the hydroponics class when they haven't taken the plant science because they like build off of each other. But they're very much concerned on just getting like the numbers and not. So like some kids have taken the intro class, intro to animal science, and then they go to Animal Science 1. And then some kids like skip the intro and just go to Animal Science 1. And they're just like, yeah, we're just getting your numbers up. But it makes it very complicated on my part.
No, I feel your pain.
Because I'm like going over stuff we already did. And so
Yeah.
I guess my question is like, any suggestions for that?
Well, purposeful conversation with our counselor and like showing them why. And like, so I tend to want to be the one that gets all blown up and big and they're, well, by God, we have to have a prerequisite. But I also understand as we work with these partners, we have to find ways to find team success. So maybe you just have to say, look, I can't have them in hydroponics unless they've had plant science. So it either needs to be a prereq or concurrent enrollment. So if you're worried about numbers, they have to take both. That's like me trying to provide a concession. Talk to me. I know it's been a while, KP, because you really have a firm relationship with your counselor and you've been there a while. Well, how do you handle those conversations?
I think what you just said, and you really have to. I realize the struggle, but if you want to have a relationship, I mean, if you want to have a program where you have prerequisites, you're just going to have to fight through it. And guidance counselors, unfortunately, seem to come and go.
Yeah.
Just like administrators, and that's hard. I mean, in our school district, we don't ever lose administrators, but we lose guidance counselors like every 3 years. So I don't know why, but you have to go and have the conversation as soon as you meet them and tell them, like, just like you were talking about your advisory committee a minute ago, you have to try to build that understanding of what you're trying to develop so they understand what you're trying to do. There are good ones and bad ones. I don't know what else to say.
I think that you got to find your small wins and then you can build up, Laura. Like, for example, reserve you a senior capstone course at this point and say, look, the only kids like next year, because that's what we're talking about, the only kids that can be in my senior ag class, they've had to at least had one ag class prior. Like you start building up little things like that. Like, look,
Okay.
or they have to have at least one ag class or be concurrently enrolled in another ag class. You can't just take senior capstone and that be your only experience. You've got to find little footholds to start building some kind of program. Because remember, if you don't have a scope and sequence like Ewing taught you, right, you're not really a program. You're a collection of a la carte elective-based classes. And if you're just a collection of a la carte elective-based classes, you're just kind of a one-off, fun, screw-around class. And you just don't want to do that. It's just not going to set up for long-term success. And at some point, like I would start making financial, because we all know this, like the only thing that's going to break through to an administrator is financial conversations. So if we look at achieving completer status or achieving versus concentrator status, you know, hey, these kids aren't passing NOCTI because you're not allowing me to set up scope and sequence. And then I have to take it back to something they understand and say, look, would you put a kid in chemistry before they had biology? Would you put a kid in calculus before they had algebra? These are concepts that we have to build upon. So therefore, I usually start, I'll be honest, my biggest thing has always been pushing the intro class. Every kid has to have intro before they can take any of my specialized classes. And if I'm trying to be nice, you at least have to take it concurrently. But I have to have a gateway class, because that gateway class is where I can teach them what the total program is. And because then I'm buying back time, because I'm not teaching what is SAE and what is FFA to my advanced animal science class. Like, we're getting deeper into content there.
Good. Thank you.
I know one thing that I did with starting this year late is with my advanced animal science class, we do a lot of work with the professors at Penn State. So it's advanced for juniors and seniors is what it's designed for. And the guidance counselor didn't understand that until I brought her into one of Dr. Ock's lectures with us. And then she understood that she couldn't just be putting freshmen or sophomores in there as a filler class because they're not understanding the content that's going on.
That's a good point, Jesse. Jesse,
Yeah.
how many times have you had Troy come and talk to your class?
He talked to us twice for sheep and goat production, and then he's going to be rejoining us again for his specialty of reproduction here in about a week.
That's
And
awesome.
Doc Niffen and Wendell Landis are both actually supposed to be coming to visit us in a couple of weeks to do our beef lecture because they were going to first Skype in, and then they decided that they would physically come and visit us at one of our students' farms.
Well, that's fun.
Cool.
Yeah, so
Thanks for sharing that.
yeah. But once I brought her in and she got to see that they're not just doing high school content, then she realized that she couldn't be dropping them in here. And it kind of worked out better.
And so for the rest of you, if you're looking at how am I going to try to articulate this, and I know, look, every idea, every suggestion, I know one thing, it takes time. And so that can be frustrating, right? So that's part of what you're planning and when you design, when you set aside those days in the summer. But I imagine a one-pager where it's a table. These are the major concepts, are my standards, and these are the academic concepts that we're addressing. And this is why you have to learn this before this. Like, I mean, you're constantly going to have to be doing this, what I call programmatic teaching to your stakeholders, to your principal, to your guidance counselor of like, this is sequenced instruction. And it's not like you can just drop in right here to do this. And it's not going to be overnight, and you're going to make concessions, and you're always going to be just try to be moving the needle forward to where you're having little wins as you build up. And so now this is where I'm totally a hypocrite because I have to say something like, you have patience, and everybody knows that Daniel does not do a good job of patience. So Dr. Ewing is laughing and giving me a hard time for saying that over here in the background. I have a peanut gallery since I had to steal his computer. By the way, I always want to be respectful of time. It's the most valuable resource that any of you have. I personally will stay on as long as you have something you want to talk about, but I don't want anybody to feel like captive. Dr. Ross came to me and said 45 to 60 minutes. If we started at 3:15, it's 4:08. There's 7 minutes left in that hour. And we can go any direction you want where you think this conversation would help you with what's the most pressing concern at this point. And I'll make an offer to you right now, like straight up. You just want to kind of brainstorm and spitball ideas for your program. Why don't you schedule a day and come up here to Happy Valley and spend it with us? Hell, I'll put you up in my house. We have the Casa de Foster. You can have the guest room for a night. Yeah, I may have to charge you a 6-pack and you have to bring beer. But no, just kidding. Shiner Bock only is the rule. That's right. No, I'm just kidding. But or even a half day. Come up here, like example, Janae, I guarantee that Ewing would do backflips to have a fun conversation about how are we going to spend 30 weeks of students teaching advanced ag mechanics. Like, that's just fun for us to sit down and kind of white space it out and say, what would a course look like? So if you want to do any kind of like programmatic decision making, want to spend half a day, we can find that day in the summer for you, and you come up and you get to block everybody out, and we can kind of help pull together resources. I think that until we reach a point where we don't have the time to do it or can't schedule it, that's fun for us and a fun conversation to have. So, you know, if that's how you think would be a good use of your time, would be glad to do that. One thing I didn't get into was evaluating commercial curriculum products. I think that our recent graduates kind of have a good handle on some of that, but things are always changing. Never doubt that you're a consumer that's valuable. So I always encourage you to push back and to say, look, I want to pilot this. Hey, look, can I have an instructor copy of a textbook? Those kind of things when you're looking at the textbook publishers. You call them up because you're an instructor, they're going to send you stuff. And then I can use that textbook to say how they design their table of contents can maybe lend how I design the course. And then I can decide if I want to buy the textbook. Maybe I never buy it, but they want to have relationships with you. And so they're going to make that stuff available. 2-week subscriptions to your program for any of the online people, AgEdNet, ICEV, Texas A&M, MyCart. They're going to try to work with you. And then you decide, is it worth that investment? And that, I think that's an individual decision. It goes back and forth. You will probably invest in curriculum areas that you're least comfortable with. Like when I teach parliamentary procedure, I'm not going to go buy a lot, right? Like when I teach animal science, it's something that I enjoyed. I'm not going to go buy a lot. But when I remember when I went into Wilcox, like plant science was a weakness of mine. So I spent more money there because I needed more crutches. I needed more resources to get through it. So I'm sure each of you have areas where you're the same on that. Heads up, since you're on the new and beginning teacher call, you should know and not be surprised that I will be issuing, well, first off, I should chastise all of you, trying to give you damn money every time I turn around. But you have until March 1st, which is in, 2 days, and I have $3,000 that I can still spend if you submit a proposal and a request that's going to advance your professional development. And so if that involved, for example, I'm stressed about ag mechanics and I want to go to Wisconsin to Briggs and Stratton, you can make that call and claim that money now. And I could allocate that. Or for case or whatever. Second thing, after March 1st window closes, we're going to have 2 scholarships for $1,500, which should be about a 50% scholarship to attend our Animal Science Case Institute. So know that that'll be opening out. I'll probably announce that sometime in the second week of March. If you like CASE. I kind of do. I like CASE, how it sits up. But every program, you have to have a buy-in at some level. So figure out what's good for you.
Any last questions for Dr. Foster?
Well, last pitch is anybody who watches this recording, or especially those of you home, we can set up a one-on-one anytime about any aspect of your program if you'd like to spitball ideas to consider. Like, hey, I'm running into this barrier. What are some ways that I can think around it? And maybe I can give you some tips to go through. So I appreciate having the opportunity to speak to you. It's always a pleasure to see you. Like I told you a long time ago, and it's still true today, once a Penn Stater, always a Penn Stater. We've invested in you, and you'll always be part of the Teach Ag family. So don't have to be enrolled in a class currently. Know that we care about you.
Well, thanks for coming, Dr. Foster. I hope everyone that joined us was able to garner some nugget of information that is useful to you. Like Dr. Foster said, just echo that. If you ever need anything, please feel free to contact us, to join us on these webinars, but to come join us here on campus anytime you'd like. I am considering maybe making the last meeting just a meeting for people to kind of come and congregate and talk and bounce ideas off, because it'll be towards the end of the school year, that type of thing. But that's just an idea I have. But in the chat, you can see a link that I shared that takes you to a document where you can put your own suggestions in as we continue to craft out the last remaining webinars. Chris Aponius, who was on this call and just signed off, she's actually going to be at the next meeting, and she's going to be sharing on science literacy strategies and integrating STEM. So that should be a pretty good one, and we're really excited about that. She just came back from some training in Florida, so she's got some good stuff. So with that,
Dr. Ross, FYI, that link takes them to your folder.
yes, that's why the second link is there.
Oh,
Disregard the first link. The second link is the right one. So please visit that if you have some time, anytime, and provide your feedback. We want to make sure we're offering professional development that meets your needs. Also, if you have not completed the center needs assessment that was sent out a few weeks ago, please do that. I sent reminders today. If you got one, please do it. Any